Yep.
Marhaba. It's great to be here.
Yep. Sorry about that. Well, I don't even think I need to give her an introduction because clearly most of you here do know who she is. But for those of you who don't know who Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha is, here's an extremely condensed bio of her. Dr. Mona is a CS Ma professor of public health at Michigan State University's College of Human Medicine, as well as the founding director of the Pediatric Public Health Initiative at Hurley Children's Hospital in Flint, Michigan. Through her research and work as a pediatrician, Dr. Mona was pivotal in uncovering the Flint water crisis. In 2018, she published her book, What the Eyes Don't See, in which she highlighted her own story as well as Flint's. The New York Times recognized the book as one of its 100 most notable books of 2018, and in that same year, Times Magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. But ultimately, Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha is an Iraqi woman who has made her community proud. So without further ado, can we please give her a warm welcome? It's our pleasure to have you here.
Shukran. It is wonderful to be here with my family, my community. Shukran.
Of course. It is our pleasure to have you here. And we're going to be talking for a good amount, so we need some water. So just excuse that.
My story is about clean water, so it's going to be water.
So this is important. This for sure clean, and this is what the people of Flint had to rely on for several years. But on to our conversation now. I know most of us in this room are Iraqi American, so I want to start this conversation now by asking about the first sentence of your book. You say, I'm Iraqi, an immigrant, born somewhere else, immediately telling your readers how important your identity is to you. So can you speak on the importance of your Iraqi American identity and how this has influenced your career path?
Thank you, Neil. That's a great question. But I think we should start by giving Neil a round of applause. I mean, he's like Oprah right here. He's doing a great job.
Thank you. I don't deserve it, but I really appreciate it, Dr. Mona.
So when I went to medical school, I didn't think I was going to write a book, but I also didn't think I was going to end up being in the middle of one of the worst environmental and public health disasters, really, of this entire country. It was international news a few years ago, and I was crazily at the center of it. So after quite a bit of reluctance, I decided to write a book because I love reading. I really grew up with literature in my house. And it was just going to be a Flint story. I was going to tell you about what I did and the research and the backlash and going up against the state and being a scientist and all this stuff. So it was just going to be about Flint. And that's how I started to write a book. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I can't tell you about being a doctor and a scientist and advocate in Flint and taking care of my kids in Flint without telling you who I am and where I came from. Because for all of us, our roots, our immigrant roots, being an Iraqi American defines us and literally gives us a superpower. So I see it as a superpower being Iraqi American. So you're right, the very, very first sentence of my book, and I think it surprises a lot of people because they pick up this book and are like, I want to learn about what happened in Flint. And then the first sentence is, I am Iraqi, an immigrant, born somewhere else. And so it starts off telling you about who I am and my family and my family history and about family stories and food and kibbeh and dolma and hummus and all the amazing part of our value system that has enabled me to grow up as someone every day grateful to be in this country, like many of us are as immigrants, but also with this amazing perspective of how the world could be and should be, and very driven to serve our communities. So my story, in addition to be, one of the people that helped uncover this bad thing in Michigan, a child advocate, is also a story of the power that we all have as immigrants, especially Iraqi immigrants, and the contributions that we give to this day in our communities.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. I really like what you said about being Iraqi is like having a superpower almost, because often we're represented in such a demeaning way, but little do people know, as our great MCs mentioned, Iraq is home to such amazing things. including, the field of medicine. And part of your identity is also, you being a pediatrician working in the field of medicine. And you talk about in your book the importance of people in your field understanding the communities that they work in. But when I was reading this, I was like, this applies to so many fields, including the ones that probably all the amazing students here want to go into. So could you speak on the importance of students like us taking an active role in our communities and understanding them?
Oh, that's a great question. So in the last couple hours I've been here, I have met so many amazing students doing policy and campaign organizing and medicine and dentistry and folks that want to go to law school and real estate, all these amazing things. Every single one of you is contributing in your community. I would recommend for all of you, and just kind of how I was raised and how I kind of sought out my education, to get as well-rounded an education as possible. You're going to learn as much inside of the classroom as you do outside of the classroom. In organizations like this, you're going to practice being leaders and organizers and public speakers. I have a chance to speak all over, sometimes in front of thousands and thousands of people. And people are like, well, how did you get to be such a good speaker, or how are you comfortable speaking in front of so many people? And I look back at my time as a student, as a college student, as a graduate student, when I raised my hand and I said, I'll organize a banquet, or I'll organize this thing, or I'll be a speaker. So take advantage of all those opportunities that you have, just like you're doing today, because those skills will absolutely come in handy when you go on to be even bigger leaders and serve your community.
That's definitely true. I mean, I don't think I'm speaking in front of a crowd even half this big, a quarter this big, 8% is big, to be honest. But I really like what you said there. I also wanted to ask you about this one quote that you kept reappearing in your book, which is, "The eyes don't see what the mind doesn't know." I really thought about this and I was like, you know what, I think I need to hear it from the expert. So could you tell the audience about that and how this applies to your daily life and your work?
Sure. So the title of my book is called What the Eyes Don't See. And it was really hard to write a book, maybe harder than medical school. It was really, really hard. It took me 2 years. It was nights and weekends. And one of the hardest parts was picking a title of the book. I had 8 pages of possible titles. And I ended up with choosing What the Eyes Don't See, because it's a phrase that I first heard as a pediatric resident. I did my residency here at the Children's Hospital of Michigan at Wayne State. And one of my professors would always say, when we were stuck and we didn't know what was wrong with a patient, he would say, "The eyes don't see what the mind doesn't know." Basically telling us to read more and to study more, because sometimes if we don't know something, we won't see it, and we won't take the best care of that person. But that phrase extends way beyond kind of medicine and knowledge. For me and my story of what happened in Flint, just like in so many of our communities, and even back home in our country, is about being invisible. It was about not being seen. It was a people, a place, a problem where people close their eyes to. Oh, that's over there, that's happening to them, they probably brought on their own problem. And ultimately, it's a power that we all have to open our eyes, to see the injustices that are happening in our own backyards, in our communities, and more importantly, than just seeing them, to taking action. What I did in Flint was hard. I raised my hand, I stood up, I said something was wrong, and a lot of people shut me down because they didn't want to hear it. But it's part of all of our duties, our civic duties, especially in this country, to not only see injustices, but to raise our hand and to speak up, especially for those less privileged than us. So that's a little bit what the title is about. The eyes don't see what the mind doesn't know, but ultimately we all have the power to see and to make a difference.
Thank you so much for that. And we're talking about your selection of What the Eyes Don't See as a book title, but another one was, goes back to the idea of you receiving backlash for doing the right thing, and it was you being called an unfortunate researcher. I don't want to say it's exactly relatable, but it is to an extent of people fearing of pursuing their endeavors because of communal or societal backlash. And I'm sure there are many people in here who maybe are quiet or reluctant to do what they want to do simply because of those obstacles. Could you provide some advice for those in the audience who want to pursue something, especially a positive goal as such, but are reluctant to do so due to these societal pressures?
Yeah, so when I went public and shared what was happening in Flint, the entire state and federal government went after me. So they called me all kinds of names and said I was wrong, and they even said I was causing near hysteria. So that word hysterical is also sexist. And for a minute, I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I screwed up. Like, who am I? Like, I'm barely 5 foot tall, a brown, first generation Arab American immigrant going up against the most powerful forces in this country. So it was hard. It was absolutely hard. And it was, there was a lot of second guessing and a sense of imposter syndrome. Like, maybe I shouldn't do this. But what I want to reiterate to all of you is to trust your gut. When you are doing the right thing, it is often the hard thing. And that was ingrained in me through my Iraqi-American heritage. There's a lot of family stories in my book, and I'm going to share one story real quick, and it's about my great-uncle Nouri. Nouri was one of 2 Iraqis that went from Baghdad to Spain to fight in the Spanish Civil War. So this was in the 1930s when Franco and the fascists were taking over Spain, and it was the beginning of World War II. And there was a bunch of Arabs that went to fight in this part of the international brigades. It's really an amazing story. You guys should all learn about the Spanish Civil War. I'm like, why is she talking about history? But this really, really brave great uncle of mine, who I heard about ever since I was a kid, he was always changing his name, and he was always on the run, and he was in jail, and he was always fleeing the authorities. There was a story of him where he dressed up in an abaya as a woman to flee the authorities. And he went to fight, he went to Palestine to fight for Palestine's independence against British rule. And then he went from Baghdad to Spain to risk his life for something bigger than a country or a religion or himself. It was about doing something for others. It was about freedom and democracy and doing that really hard thing because it was the right thing to do. So we are all going to face situations in our life, maybe not so much as a poison city or going to fight for freedom, but we're all going to have moments in our life where we have to make a decision. Should I do that hard thing? Should I stick my neck out? And the answer is always going to be yes, because it's always going to be the right thing to do. So I encourage you to do that.
I'm not complaining at all about history. I'm a big history nerd. Go follow me on Goodreads. Get my ad after this, and I'll plug it.
You can follow me on Goodreads too.
We're gonna add each other then after this. But just to end off this conversation, I have one. It's a little silly, but it's the most important question, I think. I know you did your undergrad, and I know you went to med school at Michigan State. I know you completed your residency at Wayne. But you did get your master's and bachelor's degrees from the University of Michigan. So could you just look at this table right here? This is our Michigan State and UMich boards. Can you just tell them go blue?
I bleed all colors, all colors. I went to every big school in the state. Go blue, go green, and go Warriors. Is that what you say? Yeah. You're all amazing.
After we get off stage, I know you can just tell me go blue. That's where you really lie. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and thank you so much, Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, for this great insight. I found it super thoughtful and insightful, and I hope everyone else did. If you're interested in hearing more from Dr. Mona, we have some books that will be selling at a discounted price of $15, and they're signed. So, maybe Dr. Mona does something even bigger in the future. You can sell it for more money, and you can tell your kids, I met her at this gala. So please give it up.
Yeah. Shukran, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Oops, that was a little long.